Welcome to Baptist to Orthodoxy, Episode 4, Veneration of Icons. This was a very serious issue that I wanted to get to the bottom of. I wanted to make sure that the Eastern Orthodox weren't worshiping images. Based off of information that I'd been led to believe, it seemed like the Roman Church, and then by comparison, looking at the Eastern Orthodox, were worshiping these images. The truth is they're not. Neither of them are. So I dug into different resources to go ahead and try to figure out what's the difference between veneration and worship. And just to name off some of those, at the time, I was listening to the podcast Lord of Spirits. And I know that they touch on it. I just don't know if they touched on it when I was trying to figure it out. But they also went ahead and mentioned a website by the name of orthodoxintro.org. That one I found very useful because I was able to get in contact with an actual Orthodox priest. At that point in time, I had not reached out to the church, which is almost an hour away from me. And I was unaware, it turns out, that church actually has a mission here in my city, which I was unaware of at the time. So I'm kind of out there feeling my way and talking with this priest that I'd been connected with through Orthodox Intro. And also off of Orthodox Intro, I had been pointed towards this book called Know the Faith by Father Michael Shanborn. So I got that book. I read through it like twice. I know that the difference between veneration and worship is in there. I was also Googling the terms, and that helped me run into another quick reference site called Orthodox Wiki. So all those different resources I was utilizing to get to the bottom of, and if nothing else, reaffirm that veneration is not worship. Which when I actually hit first, I'm not sure. So from there, though, then I was able to go ahead and confirm that, yes, veneration is not worship. They're not worshiping these icons. Veneration is simply showing respect or honor for something or someone, whereas worship is giving service and ministration to God and to God alone. There's no question there. So that was settled. I was happy with that answer, particularly after finding it in 4 or 5 different spots. And then I wanted to move on to the next layer, which was, is this something that the church has been doing since the beginning, or was this a much later add-on? And so that's where I started looking into history. And for me, I've already mentioned the church fathers are a big deal to me. And so I ran across a reference to St. Basil's letter 360. And again, it was on somebody's site. They said, hey, St. Basil's letter 360 went ahead and said this. So I'm like, okay, let's go find St. Basil's letter 360 and actually read what it says. So I get on out there, I search for it, I find it. If I haven't mentioned it before, newadvent.org is an excellent site for finding a lot of this stuff. Now, then I was given, later on, I was given a precaution by my Orthodox priest saying, just know that it's a Catholic site, Roman Catholic site, and therefore some of the translations may be modifies the wrong word, but the perspective that the individual doing the translations can affect the translation that they make, right? So you just got to keep that in mind. And therefore, but they have a lot of resources on there. If you go on to newadvent.org and you go under Fathers, then they have hyperlinks for numerous early church fathers and their writings on there so that you can have direct access to them. And so I believe it may have been there. I may have found it elsewhere, but either way, I read St. Basil's letter 360. In letter 360, he talks about how he asks the supplication of the martyrs and the apostles on his behalf, that he kisses their holy images that have been passed down. So right there, I was like, oh, the holy images that have been passed down, these are icons that he's talking about, and he kisses them, he shows them respect, right? He venerates them. So that pretty much settled it in my mind. It's like, oh, okay. So again, St. Basil, for those who don't remember, I think I may have mentioned it previously, but if not, he lived between 330 and 379. Exactly when he wrote this letter 360, I don't know, but seeing how there's 366 letters attributed to him, there's some arguments between 1 and 366, 361 and 366. You figure it's one of the later letters that was written, so possibly near the end of that time period. Regardless, I said, oh, St. Basil wrote on this. He was doing this. That means it was viable in the 4th century. And the way he states it so plainly, I'm like, this isn't something that he just made up, right? This is kind of like how things were. So I was good with that, but I was like, you need more than just one person's point of view, even a father of the church. And I wanted to have additional answers, additional proofs, if you will, for my wife and for others. With that in mind, I want to talk on some of the stuff surrounding letter 360. There are several people who want to say that letter 360 is spurious. That is, that Basil himself didn't actually write those, or didn't write that letter, but that it was a forgery in Basil's name in order to be used at the Seventh Ecumenical Council in order to support the idea of venerating icons. And I guess I could see that as a possibility, but he names several different things in there. According to those who support the letter, it's a letter that's written to Julian the Apostate. That is, Emperor Julian the Apostate. So he's writing to the emperor, and in there he states a big bunch of the Christian basics, if you will. So he talks about the Trinity, Jesus coming as the Christ, being born of the Virgin Mary, and he also includes that he asks the martyrs, the apostles, and the saints to supplicate on his behalf with God, and that he kisses their holy images. So he lists a big bunch of different things in there. And if you really wanted to just go for that one, you could have made it a letter from St. Basil to, or in this case, Bishop Basil to Bishop Umptyfrats, and in there had mention of icons or something like that. But as it is, being written as it is to the emperor, it seems to be in response to something. The thing that it's responding to, we don't have, but in it, St. Basil is, of course, just listing out all these basic things, and I don't think you would have needed all those different things in there if it weren't for the fact that he's answering additional questions. It's a more comprehensive one than just saying, oh, I like icons. So I don't think that's a good argument against it. Another argument against the thing is that just a fallacious argument on the surface of it, which is that icon veneration wasn't a settled issue at this point, and therefore he wouldn't have written it. Well, that's presupposing the answer, so that's no good. They kind of do that with the term Theotokos. He uses the term Theotokos in letter 360, and they're like, that's a much later developing term, mostly comes into use after 451, where they declare the Virgin Mary to be the Theotokos, that is the Mother of God. And so he wouldn't have been using that term. Now then, to touch on that one, first of all, St. Athanasius lives during the exact same time period that St. Basil does. He's a little bit older. So he's born earlier, and but dies about the same time period. So they're writing about the same time, and St. Athanasius uses the term Theotokos several times in some of his letters. Also, St. Basil actually took one of the liturgies, or we use today a liturgy by St. Basil. From what I was reading, St. Basil went ahead and took one of the earlier liturgies and shortened it. I find this a little funny because the thing that I was reading was saying that the reason he shortened it is because parishioners were falling asleep during church because it was so long. So he decided to go ahead, which he thought was disrespectful, so he was shooting for trying to, I guess, help out the parishioners to not be disrespectful by shortening the thing. So it sounds more like he cut stuff out of the liturgy instead of adding stuff, right? You got to make it shorter. But to that end, the term Theotokos is in numerous places in St. Basil's liturgy, which suggests that it very well was pre-existing, and even if not, it gets added in by St. Basil himself. So even if we don't have other letters showing him using the term Theotokos, we do know that the term was in use during that time period, i.e. St. Athanasius we know is using it, and that the liturgy bearing his name is proliferated with the word Theotokos. So it's not like he would have been a stranger to that term. And again, when he's trying to lay down various core beliefs of the Christians to Julian the Apostate, it's quite possible that he would list the Theotokos as an argument in and of itself, right? That I believe in the Virgin Mary, who is the Mother of God. So I think that's a very viable option. So in the end, you have to decide for yourself whether or not you think letter 360 is solid or not. I'm not going to sit here and beat that dead horse any further. I obviously think it is good. It was good for me, but I did want other things to go ahead and provide to other people. And there are other items out there. So let's go ahead and backtrack it and try to figure out exactly when or how long this practice has been going on. So we know in the 8th century that icon veneration was a thing. The Seventh Ecumenical Council is all about icon veneration, and it comes out and rules that icon veneration is good, it's approved, and that but icon worship is not. And that's in 787 AD. So what we have is a date. Now let's back up a little bit more. The Council of Chalcedon is held in 451. Now then, coming out of the Council of Chalcedon, the Oriental Orthodox have a difference of opinion. It's a Christological council, and they view things differently, and so they actually split off from the church at that point. So it's a small split, and but the key here is the Oriental Orthodox, they venerate icons as well. So that tells us that veneration of icons was a thing at that time that they split. So now we're back to 451. Some of our modern iconoclasts, that's just people who want to get rid of the icons, but some of our modern iconoclasts, one of the pieces of evidence they like to point to is there's this letter by St. Epiphanius. Now, then, Epiphanius ended up writing to, well, there's a couple letters. One of them is to another bishop in which he's saying, hey, I was walking through one of your towns. I come across this this image of, he said it could have been an image of Jesus or a saint. I wasn't really sure because it wasn't clear, but I tore it down. I took it. And so I promised them that I'd pay for the thing that I tore down because it was like a curtain. And so if you could have one of your servants take care of this for me. And apparently in the letter, he either sends the aforementioned curtain, or he sends money for this other bishop to go ahead and purchase it and provide it back to this place. And so he's totally anti-icon, right? He is an early iconoclast. He's against them, no doubt. Some people have argued the veracity of his letters, but I'm not going to do that one. I'm going to say, okay, fine, he's against it. But what they fail to notice is that, or when they're arguing that, oh, look, see, we have proof that early church father against icons. But in one of his letters, he's writing to Emperor Theodosius. Emperor Theodosius held office, or was emperor from 279 to 295 AD. And in this letter, Epiphanius actually complains. He says, I go to, basically, I mentioned to all these bishops and doctors of the church that they need to get rid of these, in reference to images. And some, actually, only a few, listen to me, right? So in his own words, he is an iconoclast. And he's discussing it with other bishops whenever he travels and trying to get them to take down their icons and not venerate them, so on and so forth. And the vast majority, right, because that's his complaint, that only a few listen to me. So the vast majority don't agree with him. They think he's in error. So that shows the position of the church in the late 3rd century, somewhere between 279 and 295 AD. And that's directly out of an iconoclast's mouth. Then we can back up a little bit further. We have the church. We found this church out in Syria now, and by the name of the Dura Europos Church. In it, it has numerous pictures. It has images of Christ. It has images of Mary. It has images of various stories from the Old and New Testament. And so, numerous images in there. Now then, our modern iconoclasts want to say that, oh, they're not iconoclasts. They are aniconists, or that they believe in aniconism. I'm probably mispronouncing that thing, but essentially what they're trying to say is, we're not against pictures. We're just against this venerating of these images and thinking that there's something more than just a picture on the wall. But up to this point, with the previous evidence that I've given you, we know that as late as 295 AD, that they were being venerated by the church. And that we have one iconoclast who's basically bouncing up and down because he's all upset over it. But the majority of the church isn't listening to him. Now we have this church that was uncovered, and it's believed to have been dated back to between 230 and 270. I saw one specific date of 246 AD given for the Dura Europos Church. And so they have a big bunch of these images or icons in their church. And the modern day iconoclast wants to argue that, but they weren't actually venerating those. They were just pictures in the church. Now then, at this point, I would say the burden of proof is actually on them, because we have a chain of veneration going all the way back to at least 295 AD. So when you find this church that's right around 250 AD with a big bunch of images in it, to go, yeah, but those were just pictures and they weren't venerating those, I think is a stretch. One of the places I think you're most likely to end up with the images, or where they really got started initially would have been with the Virgin Mary. The reason being is because she's considered the greatest of all saints, both by the Romans or the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman Church, and the Eastern Orthodox. So I would expect that hers would be the, next to Christ, the most proliferated image out there. And so that turns out to be the case. Philip Schaff, in his history of the Christian religion, I think is what it is, or history of the Christian church, he talks about that there's at least 50 images before the 5th century of the Virgin Mary, with several, he didn't specify how many, and I have not seen a specific list, with several being dated most probably to the 2nd or 3rd century. So that gets us back. 2nd century is in the 100s, right? Anywhere from 101 to 199, somewhere in there. And so we have potential images of Mary there in the 2nd century. So again, if we have a practice that we know is going on, and we continue to back up, and we continue to see these images, again, I would say the burden of proof is on those who say that even though veneration's over here at this point, it wasn't at that point, even though they're using similar pictures. Another thing that I think points at this this veneration, though, is a side issue, and that is getting into the veneration of the martyrs, the saints, and their relics. So you have Saint Polycarp was martyred in 155 AD. Since he was martyred in 155 AD, there's a follow-on story of the martyrdom of Saint Polycarp. In that, they collect up his bones after his body is finally burned, and they refer to them as greater than jewels and gold, right? So there's a high level of reverence, or reverence is the wrong word, a high level of respect and honor for these bones, right? It's very important that they get these things, and so they bring them back and keep them someplace safe and close so that they can revisit them. Now then, that's with his bones. I don't see that jump from the relics of the bodies of the martyrs being all that far from paying the same level of honor and respect to the images of the martyrs. So I think that's really where you're getting started. So you still have apostles who are alive all the way through the 1st century. John dies right around 100 AD, a year before or a year or two after. And then you still have a couple people who knew the apostles after that. But at this point, you start having this, high level of respect for the martyrs. And that's because that's what's happening to everybody. Whether it's, you're talking about Peter in 66 AD, Paul in 68 AD, some of the other, some of the other apostles, or you have Ignatius right around, 105 AD, I think. And so you have these individuals who are being persecuted and dying for Christ and dying for the church, and people are noticing. They're noticing their commitment to the church. They're noticing their commitment to Christ. And this is something that they want to be able to replicate themselves, and therefore they are being presented with honor and respect for that. All that taken together with proof going all the way back to, you can see at least in Epiphanius's case, at least one iconoclast who's complaining that nobody wants to listen to me, and that's at the end of the 3rd century. And then continued findings of images in the churches and such. Really what I think you have is you have an underground church. Sometimes it's in the open because different places are putting different limitations on them depending on the size of the probably the Jewish population in the area, the strength of it, the particular Roman governors in the area, how much trouble they think that Christians are causing, so on and so forth. So for the most part, though, you have this persecution going on at Christians. So they're somewhat hidden, and sometimes they can be out in the open. Apparently in Syria and Europus they can be. And so they actually have a church with their images and stuff like that that are out there. Other places they can't. In Rome, they're running around in the catacombs and they're putting up their images there. Either way, it's not out in the open. And one of the big complaints, Philip Schaff, I think, in his histories there, complains about this, talking about how in the 4th century it really starts getting bad with the images, and so he acts like that's a bad, like a bad turn for the church. Well, I don't think it's a bad turn for how the church is doing things. What I think it is you have a church that is in hiding, and so first it is spreading through the 1st century, and then after that, once it has spread, now it's trying to grow. It's being persecuted, right? So that's going through the 2nd century. Then you get into the 3rd century where you have individuals who are, battling heresies at this point. They're writing against different side comments against Gnostics and things like that. But at the same time, they're being threatened with punishments depending on, again, who the governors and stuff are under Roman rule. So that's kind of up and down. And then finally, at the beginning of the 4th century, you have Emperor Constantine in 313 who goes ahead and legalizes Christianity. Well, at this point, now they can come out of the shadows for those people who were having to operate in the shadows. And for those individuals who could at least operate in public, it's quite possible that this has still made it even more lenient and more available for them to be out in the public. And so now you have a proliferation of all the things that the Christians were doing in hiding, right? Whether that is the creation of these images, the decoration of their churches, actually opening up churches instead of having to hide what is a church and what's not a church. So these are, I don't know, it seems more to me to be the growth of the church and then things becoming more prevalent because the church goes public than some sort of decline on the church's theological foundation, if you will. So that's where I think it's at. Check out Letter 360. Look at the Seventh Ecumenical Council. And just double check me on all those other things that I mentioned. But I think you'll find that veneration of the icons is something that's been with the church from very early on, stemming from a love and respect for those people who got the church started and died for the church and died for Christ. So with that, I thank you very much for listening. And next time, I'm probably going to try to stay with a similar theme and tackle the intercession of the saints. Thank you very much and have a good evening.